Hello and welcome to Beyond Business, the program where we uncover the latest trends in the global economy. Today we're going green and we're looking at the booming market for wind power and the French quest to become a renewable energy powerhouse. France has fallen behind other European countries when it comes to green energy, but the government is putting up 10 billion euros to change that and to construct new wind turbines. As you can imagine, that's a prize that's caught the eye of many wind turbine makers.
Much of France's future energy could flow from wind farms beyond its shores. By 2015, 600 of these giant turbines will begin to dot the French coastline. The government has issued its first call for bids from companies to build the sea-based sites, providing enough energy for just over 1 million people. That would mark a turning point for France, which is on the hunt for alternatives to nuclear energy. But it has a long way to go to catch up to its European neighbours.
I wouldn't say everyone is starting on an equal footing, but there's not really a delay in the development of these machines. I would even say that our timing is quite good, as our prototype will be ready by the end of the year, while most of our competitors have announced that their first machines won't be ready till 2012.
With these prototypes not yet built, France's plans to build its own offshore industry will take time to materialize. Companies responding to the call would create the beginnings of a new French industry that would have to compete internationally. 600 turbines are to be built on 5 wind farms, from Tréport to Saint-Nazaire, via Fécamp, Courcelles-sur-Mer, and Saint-Brieuc on the way. To strengthen their position, French companies such as Areva are building partnerships with electric companies.
We have announced our alliance for all the 5 sites in France. We are exclusive with GDF Suez on 3 sites and exclusive with Iberdrola Scottish Power in the other 2 sites.
Spain's Iberdrola leads the world's renewable energy market. Areva is joining forces with the company on 2 bids to strengthen its position.
Areva is one of the most leading company in offshore industry. We have built already a capability to deliver 100 turbines in northern Germany. So we have built a supply chain, we have all the quality processes in place. We are bringing that knowledge here in France.
Since 2009, Areva has been testing the first turbines of this kind in an experimental park called Alpha Ventus in Germany. Further north, no time is lost in the race to tap into renewable energy. In Bonde, Denmark, the German company Siemens is building blades and generators. The components of each windmill are assembled here before being sent to wind farms in the North Sea.
That we gained this experience since 20 years. We developed all this experience into our serial production of the turbines, and this gives us now a clear #1 position in this industry.
With this know-how, Siemens has been able to seize the biggest contracts, like one for a wind farm that spans the shores of Denmark. The group also produces turbines for the largest offshore wind farm in the world, the London Array in Great Britain. So no surprise, perhaps, that Siemens is casting its glance over to France and preparing its own project proposals.
We are also trying to line up, as I already mentioned, with the big French utilities, with consortium partners out of the civil branch and also in the electrical field.
With the Germans and Spanish already in the race to create offshore energy, competition for the 5 French wind farms will be fierce. And that's just the beginning. The French government is expected to call for another 3,000 megawatts in 2012. It's hoped the industry's big players will respond and not leave the answer blowing in the wind.
And joining us now for more on wind power is Georgina Grenon. She works as a renewable energy advisor and she's working with the French Economy and Environment Ministry on these issues. Welcome to France 24.
Thank you.
Now, the French government, it's putting up 10 billion euros as an investment into wind power. How significant is that investment?
Well, 10 billion euros, that is 5 parks. 3 gigawatts in terms of electricity. For the general public to understand, that represents about 3 nuclear power plants.
Mm-hmm. But how does that compare, though, with other countries and their investments, those 10 billion euros?
Well, actually, you have to see those 10 billion euros in the context of our first of all, of our French objective for renewables. You know, we have an objective of 23% of all the electricity consumed to be sourced from renewable energies by 2020. So in that context, offshore wind power is just, say, a bit. It's just a portion. When you compare to other countries, you have to look. If you look at offshore wind and the objective they set for themselves, say, for example, the UK set for itself objectives, beyond 30 gigawatts in 2020. Well, we set for ourselves an objective of 6, right? But that doesn't mean our objectives are not ambitious when you look at the overall 23% of our consumption that we have.
But when you look at it, though, it does seem as if France has fallen behind countries. You just mentioned the UK there, as well as Denmark, which currently gets around about 20% of its electricity from wind power. As I say, it seems that France certainly has fallen behind at this stage.
Well, I don't think France has fallen totally behind. It depends on where you look at it, really. When you mention Denmark, I mean, they are leaders, of course, but mostly on the ground, onshore wind. Same thing, the UK is leading on the offshore wind power, but that is for the installed capacity. You also have to look at the supply chains. And France currently has a very strong supply chain that is already supplying all those fields that are built elsewhere, even though there is no big turbine manufacturer installed in the French soil. I would say our small and medium companies are providing the components that are helping the buildup of all those farms elsewhere.
Now, the government has now asked all of these companies to come up with bids to build all these wind turbines. So what's the objective of this program? Is it to boost French industries? You just mentioned those small and medium-sized companies there. Is it to boost those small and medium-sized companies, or is it to boost up France's renewable energy resources?
Well, first of all, is simply to comply with our own objectives that are written in the law, the Grenelle law, of having an amount of offshore wind power by 2020. That's the first objective. I would say a second objective is, of course, securing the supply of that electricity. In total, is the equivalent of 6 nuclear power plants. It's not minor. And I would say a third is to support, the industry, let's say European industry, into which our French players, take a part.
So nationality will play a role when France eventually chooses who will supply all of these wind turbines?
Well, no, not really. I mean, what we need for our parks is a secured supply chain. So we want to be sure.
But what does that mean? That basically means that you want to see those wind turbines built for sure.
Absolutely. We have an objective. We have to attain it, right? So we want a secured supply chain to build our parks, to ensure that we will achieve our objectives. Whether that supply chain is going to be entirely built up in France, partially built up in France, or elsewhere, is up to those participating on the bids to provide us with their choice.
Let's look at the bigger picture here, though. Is this a good investment? At the moment, France gets most of its electricity from nuclear, and at the moment, it's a lot cheaper to produce a kilowatt hour using nuclear rather than wind turbines. As I say, is this really a sound investment at this stage?
Well, you have to look, again, two things. First of all, we have an objective to do it, and that is to comply with a percentage of renewable energy, right? I would say independent of the cost. Well, no, not really, because, of course, we are trying to reduce the price as much as possible, particularly because it's the electricity consumer who pays for this electricity and its bill.
But that's my point, though. I mean, is the electricity consumer here in France really interested in paying more for their wind power than they're paying for their nuclear power? That's what the issue comes down to at the end of the day, isn't it?
Of course it is, I would say, for the consumer. But what we see is that we're starting, right, on the learning curve of this technology. You have to start building to make the price go lower. And at the same time as the price of this electricity will go lower, the overall market price for the mix, the electricity mix in Europe in general and in France in particular, will go up. So at the end, those two tails will meet. And offshore wind will become, as expensive or as cheap as you want to say it, as the average energy mix.
You say that those curves will eventually meet. Yeah. When are they going to meet, though? When is wind power going to be worth it?
Well, it depends of the constructors. Really, it's up to them to tell us how they see. We'll see in the bid as well what they propose us with. It all depends on their bids.
All right. At the moment, as you've been explaining to us, the goal is to have 23% of France's electricity coming from renewable energy sources in 2020. Is that really feasible at this stage? That's only 9-8 years away, 2020. So there's a lot of ground to cover to go from 2%, which is where we're at the moment, to 23%.
Well, we've covered as well a long ground already, from nothing to where we are. I think it all depends on the different technologies you're talking about. For example, photovoltaics has already proven that it can go well beyond our objectives by 2020.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up right there. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Georgina Grenon, thanks very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. And with that, we're going to wrap up Beyond Business. Thanks for watching France 24. And don't forget, you can get more business news on our website, france24.com.